Let's talk about the ABC. It's become a slow-burning trash fire. But worse than that, it's a trash fire that we're all paying to keep alight, when it should really just be put out of its misery. The latest case in point is the debacle involving Antoinette Lattouf. The short of it is that Antoinette Lattouf was hired on a temp, contract, fill-in position for ABC on the radio. She was hired to just fit into a little bit of a slot to fill the time. However, Antoinette Lattouf, which was common knowledge to everyone, was rather an activist. In this case, an activist in favour of Gaza and in favour of Palestine, and against Israel. This, of course, didn't sit well with the ABC. The ABC, already facing allegations of bias, and in particular bias against Israel, was now confronted with having gone out and hired someone who was even more strident against Israel and even more strident in favour of Gaza. So what did ABC do? Well, ABC turned around and, rather quickly, terminated her contract. The problem, of course, is ABC was then stuck trying to find a reason to justify this termination. ABC seemingly tried to justify it on the grounds of serious misconduct. But that serious misconduct just turned out to be cover for her political opinions, which is what the court recently found. In short, the court found that ABC fired Antoinette Lattouf because of her political opinions. And this is illegal. It violates Fair Work Act section 351, amongst other things. That specific section states that an employer cannot take adverse action against an employee or a prospective employee on the grounds of his or her political opinions. So if your employer doesn't like your political opinions, they can't fire you, they can't dock your wage, they can't take retaliatory action against you. Now, of course, many employers probably do this. Many of them do it rather clandestinely, doing it in a way that is relatively difficult to prove, doing it in a way for which they have a cover story. They might, for example, dock your wage and say, "Oh, we really have budgetary pressures," or they ex post justify it, saying that your performance was not up to par. And often they'll have performance standards that are so vague that they can justify whatever they want. It's kind of akin to the old adage, "Show me the man and I'll show you the crime." But in this case, it would be, "Show me the man and I'll show you the performance." Or in the case of Antoinette Lattouf, "Show me the woman and I'll show you the misconduct," which it appears is what ABC was trying to do. At least, that's my inference from the court decision. And this is why ABC lost. Antoinette Lattouf sued ABC for unfair termination, and ABC lost the case, being forced to pay out damages to Antoinette Lattouf in addition to a reported $1 million in legal fees to fight the case. That's a massive sum of money. And worse than that, it's a massive sum of money that the taxpayer has to pay. Not ABC's personnel, not the ABC CEO, not any ephemeral shareholders, but the taxpayer. We need to pay for this. Now, personally, I think Antoinette Lattouf is a little bit of a liability. She clearly would be bad for business, at least in my opinion, so I think she would be a rather troubling hire to take on. However, ABC found itself in the position of courting all of these activists, and then lo and behold, it blows up in their face, which is exactly what they've found now. Now, it's been reported that Antoinette Lattouf offered to settle the case for $85,000, which would have saved the ABC a lot of money. ABC has denied rejecting such a settlement offer, however, that's what the reporting is at the moment. But it begs a broader question. Why is it that we keep footing the bill for the ABC's screw-ups, and keep footing the bill for programming that in reality a lot of us don't want to watch and don't want to fund? Whose decision is it to waste our money on the ABC? For example, just footing the bill on all of these legal cases. We've got Antoinette Lattouf here, but it's not just her. In the past, we've got Essendon Russell, Owen Chow Chak Wing, and various other people that have sued ABC successfully for defamation. ABC needs to get its house in order and needs to stop wasting our money on all of these legal cases. If it were a private organization, they would realize that such conduct would cost them money, because the CEO would typically be compensated based upon the stock performance of that company, and therefore they would have an incentive to avoid this litigation. But in the ABC, no such private sector incentives exist. But not only that, ABC has tons of left-wing programming, slightly ironically given the Antoinette Lattouf situation, that is just preaching to people that don't actually want to watch it. And oftentimes this programming that actively acts against at least half of Australia, at least judging from the election results. After all, the Labour Party only got up on a 34% primary, which means that seemingly a lot of people don't actually agree wholeheartedly with Labour Party talking points, which the ABC seems to really buy into, at least at large scale, at least as my observation. Now, to be clear, ABC does also parrot Green's talking points if the Q&A programming is anything to go by. However, it tells us they're not programming for a large number of Australians, and those Australians who don't watch the ABC, don't like its programming, and find the ABC is actively advocating against their interests, are footing the bill. And I personally object to footing the bill to prop up Green's left talking points, and have those rammed down my throat if I were to turn it on, but worse, indoctrinating people to act against my interests. Why is it that I should be funding that? Why is it that any of us watching this should be funding that? The ABC should have to function under private sector imperatives, which means they would not be able to go out and just parrot sophomoric left talking points and expect to keep functioning. They would actually need to do something productive. And the ABC, to my mind, doesn't do anything productive, or at least does very little productive, and therefore really, at this point, needs to be defunded. And it's not just those of us who are on the so-called right who want ABC to be defunded, and I say so-called right because oftentimes when people label something as being right-wing, it's just a weasel word to demonize them. But it's not just the right that seemingly have a problem with ABC, it is also progressives, so to speak, as evidenced by Antoinette Lattouf being dismissed. And it means that ABC has caught itself in this rather precarious situation, where it isn't left-wing enough for the left, and it's clearly too biased for the so-called right, and therefore the ABC finds itself without a neat home. It's really just catering to a small sliver of inner-city activists who are sitting comfortably in the inner city, knowing full well that the policies they're advocating for aren't really going to cost them any money, i.e. they're advocating for the spending of other people's money and advocating for policies that cost other people resources. It's high time that ABC has to stand on its own feet, and it's high time that we stop propping up that organisation. Now, of course, there are broader implications of this whole Antoinette Lattouf saga for the rest of us. It does illustrate that your employer cannot just dismiss you for your political opinions. But let's face it, how many of us could actually challenge this? How many of us have the resources to go to federal court to sue our employer if we're dismissed? Think about how much money that cost. In this case, it cost ABC $1 million. Now, clearly, a private individual would spend much less money, but it's still going to be many thousands of dollars to go and take this case. The vast majority of us do not have those resources. And indeed, if it was someone other than Antoinette Lattouf, maybe ABC could have just steamrolled over them. And then think about any corporation, for example, of the corporations that backed the voice referendum, where they could easily just dismiss someone, knowing full well that people don't have the resources to actually challenge it. Which means that Antoinette Lattouf's victory here is really just a Pyrrhic victory. It's something that none of us can really rely upon in practical terms. But you can let me know your thoughts about the ABC in the comments below. Personally, I think the only good shows on it at the moment are things like Hard Quiz and Muster Dogs. The rest of it, I could very much live without. But let me know what you think in the comments below.